Hey there, welcome to another edition of Comic Book Geezers. Today is Sunday, July the 16th. I am Pete.
I'm Wild Bill, the Unknown Comic. How you doing, everybody? Thanks for joining us.
Yep, we are here for another edition of talking about kind of like all the classics in Marvel, DC, Independence, you name it. Today we're going to focus on Marvel, and this is our fifth episode.
Fifth episode is what I'm going to spit out. Yeah, and we're going to focus on a classic character, Dracula.
Not an original Marvel character, however.
Correct. Not one of Stan Lee's babies, but still a successful character nonetheless. Written by Marv Wolfman, and the artist is Gene Colan. And we're going to start off by, as you know, Dracula was written by Bram Stoker, which was a book written in the late 1800s. And then it kicked off a movie in 1922, which was a silent feature, Nosferatu. Starring Max Schreck was the actor.
Yep, directed by F.W. Murnau, who was a famed director back at the time. And
it was a German movie at the time.
Yes.
And a good movie. And still
creepy as hell. I mean,
yes,
this is
for
probably
a silent
one of
movie,
the creepiest silent movies ever made. I mean, how about that scene where he just kind
of pointed ears
and the big claws, and he just kind of comes up.
They do his shadow cast. Even his shadow is creepy looking. It's very well done.
If you're a younger person who is not really familiar with silent movies and think, black and white, no talking, whatever, I really urge you to give
it a try.
A chance.
Yeah.
It's really one of the most chilling horror movies ever made.
And then later on in life, because that movie was such a success, the Americans picked up on it. Hollywood picked up on it. In 1930, we have the classic starring Bela Lugosi, Dracula.
Universal.
Yes. Awesome.
And this basically spawned a whole franchise of Universal horror monsters throughout the 30s, 40s, and early 50s.
It was a complete success.
Which, we grew up on. You talk to us about monsters. Those are the monsters of our childhood.
Carl Laemmle Jr.
Yep.
Am I saying his last name right? It was his idea, and his father was in control of Universal and was dead set against this character. Didn't think it had any audience drawing power. Didn't think it would make any money at the box office. And lo and behold, it was such a success that Bela Lugosi had put him on the map as the #1 monster actor at the time in 1930, prior to Frankenstein in 1931.
And unfortunately for Bela, it also kind of stereotyped him going forward. So here you have, he was, I think, in his early 40s.
I think he was 50 when he did Dracula. He was 50, I believe.
So, Hungarian actor, very thick accent, and he was pretty much a B-movie star before that, and this kind of threw him into the spotlight. And he actually played vampires a couple times after that, but he never would reprise the actual role of Dracula in a Universal movie again until about 20 years later in the Abbott and Costello and Me Frankenstein film.
And also, his success from that movie here, Hollywood wanted to use him and cast him as Frankenstein, but the script and the makeup, when they put him in the makeup, he looked more like the Golem, which was another fictitious character.
Very round face, yeah.
Roundish, kind of a skirt, like a Dutch boy kind of haircut. Not very intimidating, not very scary at all. And they didn't like the way he looked in the makeup, so they didn't give him the job. And then the director, James Whale, saw Boris Karloff in the cafeteria in Universal Studios and saw the height of his body and everything and thought he'd be good for the monster.
The rest is history.
And when they set him up in the makeup, the script had changed and the concept, the artist's sketches of the monster changed, and he looked a lot more scarier, and he landed the role, and it also put a bitter taste in Lugosi's mouth because he didn't like the character, the script anyway, because he was disappointed that the monster had no lines. Bela Lugosi had started in silent films, had played Dracula many times on Broadway in theater prior to the movie being made. So he was the man for doing Dracula. Me being an unknown comic, I basically do impressions is my thing. And my interpretation is that Bela Lugosi is basically doing an impression. It's his vampire impression. They say he's acting, but he's really doing an impression in my opinion. And he knocks it out of the park.
He does. Yeah.
And he really does. And he has such a bitter taste. He holds a grudge against Karloff, and yet these guys are at odds, and it's really Bela who's jealous of, I think, Boris Karloff's success from Frankenstein. But when they're cast together, they work so well together off each other. You think that they're best friends.
Movies together. I mean, the Black Cat and the Raven.
The Black Cat, the Raven.
Films. And ironically, Bela would actually get to play the Frankenstein monster in Frankenstein Meets the Wolfman.
Yep. And nobody...
Not to great effect, if you ask me.
Exactly. Karloff was the man. And Karloff gave it up after 3 movies. He thought they were beating a dead horse. He didn't like the fact that they gave the monster lines in the second movie. Again, I guess they felt he was going to be typecast. Karloff had done at least 80 movies prior to Frankenstein. But anyway, enough of the movie history. Let's move on to the comic
Well,
books.
real quick, Hammer. We forgot about Hammer. So
get
again, the final part of the Dracula lore. Well, not the final part, but the classic Dracula lore. So about 20, 25 years later, after Universal had kind of done its run with the horror stuff, a British studio called Hammer Films
In the
decided
50s.
to pick up the mantle. Right. So they did a bunch of Dracula-related films throughout the 50s, 60s, and 70s, starring Christopher Lee in the title role. Not all the films are great. They're all kind of cool. The first couple are really, really good. For my money, as great as Lugosi was, I always have been of the opinion that Christopher Lee was the quintessential Dracula character.
He was a good actor for the role too. He was a good choice, and so
And
I
the
don't
films
think
were different, very different.
I think Christopher Lee did an outstanding job as Dracula. I had Horror of Dracula, which was a good one.
So what does this have to do with what we're talking about here today? So here we go to the early 70s, and Marvel, like we mentioned earlier, Marvel was all of a sudden trying to branch out into like non-superhero areas. So they were taking these characters that they actually didn't own, properties that either came from fiction or film or whatever, and they started to do like horror and hack and slash, like Bill likes to call them, sword and sorcery type of thing. We're going to talk about one of their most popular sword and sorcery characters of all time in the next episode. But the first series to really launch this kind of horror character, they did a lot of horror comics, but horror character was Dracula. And it all started in, I believe it was 1971 or
72? 1972.
So this is the very, very first issue, okay?
And this is what started the fire for the love of horror comic books. This guy lasted 72 issues, I believe.
Yeah.
So for a horror-themed comic, this was a very big popular hit for Marvel Comics. A lot of their other horror themes, 20, 30 issues, not really
longer run than Frankenstein. It was a longer run than Werewolf by Night. It was a longer run than Man-Thing. I mean, just put that into perspective. That just goes to show you how popular vampires were. And I want to mention one quick thing, because we're going to see it all throughout. We're going to show you today. So what do you besides for Dracula, what do you see on this cover, right? You see him carrying a unconscious female, right? So many of the covers, as great as they are, have him holding or standing over an unconscious female victim, even though that may not happen in the comic at all.
Can I cheat and go out of order real quick?
Go ahead.
Issue number 16, another female. So we'll kick it back to Pete. So we're going to show you the first 30 issues of Dracula tonight, because we want to keep it short and brief, but we love the character, and we're comic book users. We can keep talking about comics all day long.
All day long.
So we thank you for being here with us.
And artist who did the entire run was Gene Colan. We were actually just talking before we went on live here about what else he did. So Gene Colan also did Iron Man. He did Captain America.
Daredevil.
And Daredevil. So he was involved with a lot of really high-profile
Great artist.
Yeah. So here's issue number 2. Look what we have there. Okay.
Another female
on the
in
bottom.
distress.
In distress.
He's not there to help.
Right. Here's a really cool cover.
Yes, that's a beautiful
Number
one.
3. And while I'm showing these, maybe Bill can talk a little bit about the supporting cast.
Quincy Van Helsing was the father going after Dracula. His daughter, Rachel Van Helsing, and believe it or not, a descendant of Dracula, a relative, Frank Drake, is like a distant cousin of Dracula. So these three are always on the hunt after Dracula. And some of the powers that the vampire has, he can turn into mist, change into a bat, change into a wolf, and it's almost every time they attack, he usually refers, Dracula turns into mist. So they usually use wooden arrows, wooden knives to try and kill him, but every time they fire, he turns into mist, so they can't catch. He's always one step ahead of them with evading them.
And superhuman strength, and he talks a hell of a lot more in the comics than he ever did in any of the movies.
And his dialogue is amazing. He's just so devious.
So here's the first issue where he actually goes up against like another creature, so to speak. The monster in the moors. This actually was like a deformed child of some family that lived out in the moors somewhere. But just look at that cover.
And he gives Dracula a run for his money in that fight. It's a great issue.
Look at that price. 5 simoleons.
Yes, I got lucky on that one.
Can't beat that.
Most people are asking $10 to $15 per issue. I've seen average $10 to $15 prices on these books. This is a great one. He gets children to do his evil bidding. Yeah. He recruits them,
Make no mistake, he was an evil character. but he was like this kind of anti-hero that, like, even though essentially he was a villain, this appealed to people.
And another thing to reinforce what Pete just said is Dracula kills a lot of people in these books. There's a lot of people dying. In the superhero books, you don't have a lot of people dying. They get hurt, they get messed up, but they don't die.
Right.
He's killing people. Sometimes 2 or 3 people in an episode because he's got to quench his thirst for blood.
Yeah.
He also puts a lot of people under his power. He can put you into a trance to make you do what he wants, like the Jedi mind warp. Dracula was doing the Jedi mind warp before Star Wars was invented.
That is true. So now this is issue number 9, right? So we have a little gap here. So we're missing an issue. So
number 10, which is the first appearance of Blade. Yes. Very important character. The first character that Marvel Comics turned into a movie. Not excluding Conan, which was the first movie from Marvel, but that's
Howard the Duck, I guess.
Howard the Duck was before Conan? Yeah. I think Conan was Schwarzenegger, 82.
Yeah, you're true. Yeah, you're right.
So, but it's not a Marvel production.
Marvel had really nothing to do with that. So this is issue 11. So 10 is the debut of Blade. Pretty pricey, as you can imagine. Again, another cool cover with him.
Number 12. This was the first of my 2 original Tomb of Dracula issues. And then when I started buying again last year, now I have about 54 out of the 72 issues. So I've really exploded with Tomb of Dracula.
This is number 13, and you only seen him from the back, but that is Mr. Blade.
This is Blade. This is a very sought-after book because this one goes into his origin. This one tells the Blade origin.
Yeah, moving it's a whole story about his mother and so on and so forth, and it's a little bit different origin than what we know from the movies. Number 14, again, the Count with a lovely lady. And then we're going to get up halfway through number 15. This is actually a very cool cover.
This is my second of the 2 that I just mentioned. I love this cover.
Yeah.
And talking about how he can change form, how Dracula didn't sense this hunter is amazing. But
it was actually a bat that the hunter...
He shot him as a bat, but what's amazing is when the hunter walks up to check on what he just shot, it's in human form Dracula, and he actually attacks the hunter. So moving right along, I showed you number 16. I'll show you again real quick, but this was number 16. Again, another female in his arms. Number 17. Again, this was a great one. Again, Dracula coming up on a woman, and she has a child, and the child's like, "Who is that nice man?" Because when Dracula meets the kid actually is nice to the vampire, and Dracula's like taken by the kindness of the child, and doesn't react viciously towards the kid. This is a classic. This is a fight between Dracula and Werewolf by Night. This is what they call a crossover, where the story starts in Werewolf by Night, and then it concludes. The second part of the story is this right here, this issue.
Remember that, because we're going to get back to it in a little bit.
Okay. Then we have issue 19. We talked about wooden stakes as weapons. This is Rachel Van Helsing trying to drive a stake through Dracula while he's sleeping. But, of course, he lives through that attack. Moving right along, another great cover here. Issue number 20. Again, now they're trying to get him from the sky, fly over him. Dracula, actually, this takes place in the Swiss Alps, and he actually is trying to avoid them, and he actually does lose them. They lose his trail. They hunt him down all around the world. He eventually escapes and makes his way to London, and that'll come up in the next couple issues. But I love this cover with the fire. It's just a beautiful cover. Again, Marv Wolfman as the writer and Gene Colan were the greatest combination of writer and artist for this story. And, they did such a superb job. And look at the artwork on this one. This one I picked up at a flea market, and I think they wanted $15 for it. Oops, I dropped it. Yeah, that's right. That little sticker there, $15. I was able to talk the guy down. I don't know. I got it down for like maybe $10 because I bought other comics as well. This one is a great comic as well. Nice cover. This is issue 23. Moving right along, number 24. Again, the theme of Dracula terrorizing a woman. This is a showgirl, and he sneaks in. She thinks it's someone that's coming to compliment her on her acting performance. He was in the audience at the theater, but he's there for your blood, honey, not for your autograph. This is issue 25. Another great action cover. Moving right along, number 26.
I love that one.
Again, another woman in distress. It's just real. You'll notice all these covers, the colors pop. I'm proud that I got most of these books in good shape because they're hard to find in good condition.
Yeah.
Because these books are 40 some odd years old now. Moving right along here. This is where am I? Number 27. Number 27. It's hard to look backwards in reverse.
And here we go. Another big battle with Blade.
Number 28. And this is Blade right here. And looks a lot different than the Wesley Snipes character in the black leather and the sword. Blade didn't carry a sword. He used wooden knives.
Yep.
This is issue 29. And moving to the last one we'll wrap up for Tomb of Dracula is issue number 30. And I got a good price on this one last year. About $3 to $5, somewhere around there. So and that concludes our Tomb of Dracula comics.
One thing I do want to mention before we kind of move on a little bit here is that, he had other Marvel characters did get introduced or kind of come through the Dracula kind of canon, so to speak. So like Brother Voodoo made an appearance in a few later issues, as well as he had a 2 or 3 issue battle with Doctor Strange.
That was issue 44. Brother Voodoo is either 32 or 33.
Yep.
Between 32 and 35, somewhere in there, Brother Voodoo.
And then you also let's not forget that giant size Spider-Man with Dracula. Although
number 1, it's a number 1 issue.
Yeah, I don't know if I should spoil it, but the cover's a little deceiving. Should I spoil it?
Go ahead. They're listening.
I mean,
that's what they're here for.
Yeah,
come on.
So this has got this great cover. It's got this great cover. Dracula and Spider-Man this great battle, and they never even meet in the comic.
Yeah,
they're on the same ship.
It's a little bait and switch. Usually the cover relates to the story inside, but
So kind of disappointing, but the cover is fantastic, and
I'm still on the hunt for that one.
Yeah, it's well worth getting.
So Pete has some other interesting things vampire related, which I think I brought it up to him. I said you got to bring these in. So they did magazines on Dracula. They called it Dracula Lives.
Yep. And these were going simultaneously with the color comic, right? These were monthly black and white magazines aimed at a little more mature reader because they could obviously go a little further with content and gore and sex and all that kind of stuff.
And the black and white artwork, you would think not, again, boring, blah, but it works. It really works. It kind of ties in with the old black and white movies.
Yeah.
But the covers are color.
Yeah, the covers are really cool. And what I really like about these is that not only does it continue the Dracula storyline, but they have articles about vampire films, other short stories and things like that, which is kind of neat. So here's another one. So this one's got a whole piece on Christopher Lee. You can see down at the bottom they talk about Christopher Lee.
Just really, really good artwork. The colors pop. These are in really good shape, Pete. By the way, you've kept these very well.
Yeah.
Keep them out of the light. Comic books are like vampires. You don't want to leave them in the sunlight because they'll fade.
Yep. And
I love that analogy.
Dracula's daughter. Her name. She's in a couple issues.
She's in a couple Tomb of Dracula.
Is that Lilith? Is that
it
Lilith?
might be. It begins with an L. I don't know if it's Lilith. But yeah, she's not a fan of her father. She's very pissed off.
Yeah.
And they did another solo. It's off the top of my head now. There was a number 1 issue where she started. I can't think of it. Was that Chamber of Thrills or something like that? It was she got started in a number 1 special issue.
Yes,
and it really continued.
Yeah,
they only did 4 or 5 issues, but they refer to it a lot of times. When they do the little asterisks when they do a flashback and they tell you what it's from the story, and that's from the number 1 issue where she appears. But she's not a fan of her father's.
No,
she's got a lot of hate in her blood.
So in addition to the Dracula Lives magazine, they also launched this Vampire Tale. So that was so they could introduce other characters like Lilith, like Morbius, as well as Dracula. So I have a bunch of these as well, and these covers are even somewhat better, I think.
Yeah. These look at that. I'll pull it back for you. Awesome. We're trying to keep the glare off the bags, with the light, but that's always an issue. But it's minor.
Another one here.
Really, really good.
Count Yorga, if you're familiar with the 70s films, that was another vampire film series, actually kind of fun. Here's another one which has got a whole story on Morbius as well as Blade. Blade actually appered.
I like this cover, man. This is amazing. This is the one when you look at it, you go, I wish the whole inside was in color, But but yeah, these are amazing, Pete. Thanks for bringing these in.
2 more, actually. Again, another series called The Legion of Monsters, and this basically was kind of like an homage to the Universal horror characters. So, as you can see here, you've got a Dracula character. What they do is they actually take the original Dracula story and make a comic out of it. You got the Frankenstein monster and this guy here who
kind of reminds me. I'm thinking Creature of the Black Lagoon.
Yeah.
But the face, but still, I mean, it's not the Creature of Black Lagoon, but I get it. You know, it's
Yeah.
definitely cool looking, and Dracula seems like he's in command in the background. Rise, you know.
And then one more, and here we got on the cover, we got Mr. Morbius and Mr. Blade. Okay,
Yeah,
there's another Legion of
Blade
Monsters.
over here.
Yeah.
Morbius in the back over here. Another damsel in distress, it looks like.
Yeah.
Very cool. So that wraps up our Tomb of Dracula. Now we're going to flip over real quick to our favorite covers. We're going to end our episode with favorite covers. Now I'm going off the beaten path, and I'm going to show you this Swamp Thing. This is from, I love this cover, man. Look at the detail of that tree.
Yeah.
This is, I believe, 1992.
That's John Constantine in the corner, correct?
I believe so, yes.
Smoking a cigarette. There you go.
Great, great cover. And then
That's classic.
I'm going to go, I always said Hulk was my favorite. I'll show you this one. This is prior to 179. Love this cover. I got two more for you, but I'll kick it back to Pete real quick.
Okay, so remember a couple minutes ago we were looking at that issue of Tomb of Dracula where he's fighting Werewolf by Night, and I said, remember that's going to come back again. So the continuation of the story, actually was in
Werewolf by Night.
And there it is.
Let's see.
Mr. Mike Klug.
Oh, great art, Mike Klug. And what else you got there?
Here we are. And,
This is a beauty.
Yeah. So I just recently, I'm not going to go into the whole story, but I just recently bought a bunch of really cool old Silver Surfers, and I had to bring one of them to show because it's one of the most iconic covers ever
In the history of Marvel Comics.
So look at that.
A lot of people love this cover.
Yeah. So the Surfer against
two of the
Thor.
greatest superheroes head to head. We've mentioned it before in the previous issue. The three greatest heroes, strongest in the Marvel Universe. Two of them right there. The third one is the Hulk. Speaking of the Hulk, again another favorite cover of mine. The Hulk versus the Swamp Thing. Great, great story. Awesome.
Man-Thing, actually.
Excuse me, yes. Man-Thing.
And this actually was, what, a 3-issue storyline? Or two or 3 issue storyline?
I think it was 2, maybe 3.
They fought in the first one, which was this, and then they actually teamed up in the next 2. Really good.
I've read these a long time ago, but I still
really
have them. I can always go back. Sorry I didn't do my homework, gang. And a recent acquisition for me, favorite cover, back to the vampire theme, Son of Dracula by Atlas Comics, #1 issue. So when I saw this, I was like, oh, I have to grab this. Haven't read it yet, but it's only like 20 pages. It's kind of short on the inside. But I've never heard of this book before, so I jumped on it, man. So that wraps up my favorite covers for this edition of Comic Book Geezers.
So my last 2, and I'm going to keep it kind of current here. Well, the issues aren't current, but the new Spider-Man film is out, and that's kind of all the talk right now. It's a very cool movie. So I decided, let me go pull into my Spider-Man bag of tricks.
Keeping in the spirit of the new movie.
Yeah, okay. So we're going to go all the way back to issue number 34 with Mr. Steve Ditko and Kraven the Hunter.
Is that his first appearance?
Second appearance.
Second appearance.
Yeah.
Okay. Awesome book. That's in great shape.
Yep, it is. And
that's probably from like what 1960. What number is that?
That's 34. So it's
34. So
67 or 66.
33 years. He started in 62. He had 3 years. That's 65.
Yeah.
Maybe 66.
So it's an old one.
Yes.
And then the Vulture, right? Because Vulture's in a new movie. Look at that one.
Awesome.
Very
Love
cool.
that.
So, and this was already when Johnny Romita had taken over. So, some classic stuff there. Favorite covers.
Okay.
So that's it for this week. We're going to kind of continue on with the theme of non-Marvel owned characters for the next episode. Should we just tell them what we're going to do?
I think so. We're going to do Conan the Barbarian. Yep. So stay tuned for that one. And I'm Wild Bill signing out for Comic Book Geezers saying thanks for joining us, and we look forward to seeing you next time. Peace, guys.
I am Pete. Comic Book Geezers coming at you real soon. Take care.
Bye-bye.